Okay, welcome to our session on Agile coaching ethics. And we were having a conversation about this with Lori earlier. I mean, where you come up with encountering ethics, and we'll get more into that. But you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, Sarah? Tell a little bit about who you are.
Sure. I'm Sarah Skold. I have the pleasure of working with Alex at Macquarie Group, which is an Australian-owned investment bank. We work in the retail arm of the bank, so we provide things like home loans and credit cards, transaction accounts to our clients. And my role is to really understand what our clients think about our products and services and support the decision to make customer-based prioritization decisions. And we do that through a variety of Agile practices. And so we're super lucky to have Alex as our Agile coach on that journey. I'm actually pretty new to the business. I spent most of my career so far in human resources and most recently in learning and development, where I was responsible for our leadership development program and executive coaching program. And then more recently, I decided that I wanted to put my training and facilitation skills to good use in my community. So I started to volunteer teach at my kids' primary school in the field of ethics. In Australia, parents can choose a religious class for their children to attend each week. It's compulsory for schools to allow a half an hour slot for students to learn about religion. And more recently, that program's been expanded to include an ethics line because there were less and less people wanting their children to partake in religious instruction. So I think it was about 7 years ago, a group of people petitioned the government to allow for a different stream, which was ethics. So yeah, I've started to teach ethics to primary school students. And when Alex found out that I do that, he this plan to smush our Agile and ethics knowledge and on this training session. So that's how we're here today.
You know, when I first moved to Australia, Sarah, it kind of tripped me out that religious instruction was required in public schools. But yeah, I think that that option to do other stuff is good as well. So hi there, my name's Alex Sloley. You can probably tell from my accent that I'm not Australian, although I have been, I have been practicing. I've been living in Australia for 5 years now, and I'll give you a taste of my Aussie accent after 5 years. Are you ready for this? Sarah's going to find this hysterical. You ready? Okay. G'day, mate. Let's throw some shrimp on the barbie. What'd you think?
Yeah, I think we could work. We could work on it. Getting there.
So you were talking earlier about Microsoft and being taught by Bill Gates. So I was at Microsoft, Lori. I was at Microsoft for 15 years, and I'm originally from Seattle, and I moved to Australia in 2015. And I'm an Agile coach, and until COVID-19 hit, I traveled around the world like Shane does, who's also on this session, and we speak at conferences. And he and I, we hang out at Agile conferences together, and Richard Dolman and me, you know, we go out and we go to conferences and hang out with awesome people like you and drink beer. And we're thrilled to be here today because I think with this new virtual world, we can actually get together this way. Although I'd rather see you in person, I am happy to see you in Zoom anyway. And you know, maybe you'll find some of what me and Sarah is sharing interesting, and we'll see what happens. Because today we're going to talk about ethics, and let's talk about what that means. You ready, Sarah?
Yeah, go for it.
And then anytime you want to ask questions like Lori suggested, you can just fire it out. Me and Sarah have an agreement on how questions are going to work between us, so we'll see how that works out too. All right. So the whole ethics thing that we were talking about, Sarah, you and I getting together over this thing, I mean, my interest in it from an Agile coaching perspective was I run up into what I consider to be ethical situations all the time. And I have to make decisions as an Agile coach about what I'm going to do in that situation, because I'm aware that I'm running into an ethical situation and I have to make a decision. So when I heard that you did ethical stuff at your kid's primary school, I was really interested, because I think as an Agile coach, you aren't really taught about Agile ethics or ethics in general. Like, unless you've taken ethics in a school setting, like a university or something, you probably don't know what the heck is involved with ethics. So I think most Agile coaches navigate instinctively there rather than knowingly. And I think when I talked to you, you were one of the people I've met who actually like knows what ethics is, because you've been teaching kids. So that was my motivation to get together with you. So what was your, like, what were your thoughts when we got together and started talking about ethics?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's super interesting, especially from the work that I'd done previously in executive coaching as well, because I know that the Coaching Foundation in Australia has come up with a principle or a set of ethics that they ask their coaches to agree to and abide by. And I think that there's just so much opportunity to talk about this and to make it a bit more overt, I suppose. And as you suggested, like most people have some kind of ethics. Obviously, they have ways that they make decisions, and they have things that they have inherently sort of know are right versus wrong. But do we talk about it very much? Not really. And everyone's kind of making their own decisions without having that open discussion about it. And what we do in the primary school program is we really encourage students to talk about it and to listen to other people's ideas, and to really think about their reasons for making decisions. And, you know, in primary school, there's so many things that are, you know, a decision that you have to make, and whether or not it's really an ethical one. You know, we probably wouldn't call it an ethical decision necessarily, but I mean, for example, my daughter today has they're voting for the Student Representative Council, and she really wants to be on that, and she's practiced her speech, and she's really excited. But her best friend is also going up, and they've been told that they can't vote for it themselves, so they have to vote for someone else. So she's thinking, you know, should I vote for my best friend? But I don't know whether I should do that, because then she might get it and I really want it. And yeah, I mean, that's an ethical dilemma when you're 7. And so having a discussion about it, and interestingly, it is one of the topics that we cover in our ethics training at school, voting and representative councils and things like that. And so having had that conversation previously really gave her a lot more context, a lot more things to talk about, a lot more kind of, I guess, understanding of how she might approach that decision. And I guess that's what I'm really keen to kind of encourage, is that we talk about this stuff before we have to make that kind of decision. And I really love this quote, and good pickup around the good place being the focus for our session today, or one of the focuses, because I hope everyone's had a chance to watch. If you haven't watched The Good Place, please watch it. It's such an interesting show. But one of the main characters, Chidi Anagonye, this is a quote from him: principles aren't principles when you pick and choose when you're going to follow them. That really stands true. You know, if you've had a conversation about something previously and you've agreed how you're going to approach something, it's a lot easier to navigate through those situations.
You talked about voting. That's really relevant in the United States right now, right? There's a major election coming up. The people on the call probably know what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the Scrum Alliance Board of Directors election.
Right.
Oh yeah. There's also this presidential election thing in the United States. I forgot about that. Yeah, there's that too. So, okay. Let's get going. So, I'm going to ask you guys a question. So, in The Good Place, the TV show, there's an afterlife. So the whole premise of the show is essentially you've ended up in an afterlife. The characters have ended up in an afterlife, and they've ended up there through what they think is an administrative mistake. So you've got a bunch of people who've ended up in some place called the good place that they think is heaven, and that they've ended up there. It's a mistake that they've gotten there. So my question to all of you is, I'm giving you an ethical dilemma to think about. If you ended up in heaven and you knew you ended up there mistakenly, right? It was an administrative mistake. What would you do, right? Would you confess? Would you tell them and confess and say, hey, I know I ended up here based on an administrative mistake. You should really kick me out because I'm not supposed to be here, right? Or would you say nothing? You would stay silent because you want to stay in heaven, right? You don't want to get kicked out. So would you fess up or would you not fess up? That's the question I'm asking all of you to think about. You're in heaven on a mistake. Do you confess that you know you're there on a mistake or not, right? So it's essentially a confession. Would you tell the truth or not? So I'm going to give you a second to think about it. Keep in mind, if you're not in heaven, you're in hell. So the consequences are pretty extreme. So if you're not familiar with Zoom, there's this thing called Zoom reactions. So down in the lower part of Zoom, right, there's this, in your little control panel of tools, there's reactions. So why don't you guys try one of the reactions? There's a clap thingy, and then there's a thumbs up thingy. Just try one right now and see what happens if you've never seen it. Look at that, Sarah. They're experts at Zoom. Everybody's an expert at Zoom now. So here's my question. I'm going to count down to 0, and then you're going to tell me using a Zoom reaction what you would do. Don't do it yet. You give me a thumbs up if you would stay silent, and a clap for confess, and then I'll count down to 0, and we'll all do it at the same time. You ready? So thumbs up for staying silent, and a clap for confess. You ready? 3, 2, 1, 0. Wow. What do you think, Sarah?
Wow. Interesting.
What's interesting about it?
I'm scrolling through. I'm trying to see what everyone has done.
Yeah,
wow.
they don't
That's
persist.
Quite a split.
Yeah?
I can see interesting thoughts as well on the chat.
So some people would confess and some people would stay silent, but ultimately it comes down to, I think, an ethical decision, right? All right, let's talk more.
How did you make that decision is what I'm really interested to unpack. How did you decide what you would do? What are the things that went through your mind? And this kind of talks to what I mentioned before around how we teach students in primary school. It's about thinking about your reasons. So take a moment, channel your inner Eleanor, one of the characters on the show, or your inner Chidi. They spend a lot of time in the show really talking through things and analyzing what they might do or what they might not do. So channel your inner Eleanor or your inner Chidi and just spend a moment unpacking the steps that you took to get to that decision. And we might use the chat function here to share some of that. So it looks like people are already popping some thoughts on there. If everyone could get in, that would be awesome. If everyone could get in and pop some thoughts in there. We can do it in a chat blast where we all put our thoughts in at the one time. It looks like we've already got a few thoughts in there. So feel free to jump in, put some thoughts in.
So a chat blast is where everybody puts their thoughts into chat and we all hit enter at the same time. And chat explodes with a bunch of comments. So we'll count down to 0. If you haven't written something already, go ahead and write something in, but don't press enter. And then I'll count down to 0 and we'll all press enter at the same time. How did you decide what to do? You want to count down, Sarah?
Yeah.
Do
all
it.
right. Ready? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. after a lifetime of possibly suspect behavior, I'd be okay to keep my mouth shut and stick around. You're thinking back in the past. Then we've got a few things here on it depends. I have imperfect information.
Oh.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Yep.
That's interesting.
So enough information, and that's something we'll talk about later on in the session.
Yeah.
You compared your goodness to others. Okay, so that's one of the approaches as well that we'll talk about a little bit later on in the session.
Cool.
Yeah, lots of interesting thoughts there. And you can see that almost everyone has a different way of approaching how you make that decision. Even though you might have come to the same decision, ultimately there were only really two choices here. We've all had a very different way of thinking about how we came to that decision.
All right. So I think, first of all, we have to talk about what ethics means. And I know for myself, I didn't really know what ethics mean until I actually looked it up. But this kind of predated our relationship, Sarah, because I was at an Agile conference, and we were talking about ethical coaching. This was some years ago, and I had to actually go look it up. And right here before you, you can see a technical definition of morals and ethics. And the reason we bring those up is because people often confuse the two things. Like, morals are your personal beliefs that you hold to be true. And essentially, when you just did your little exercise right now with, should I stay in the good place or not? Should I confess or not? Some of you perhaps might have used your own personal moral compass to evaluate the situation to determine what to do, rather than use an ethical compass. I don't know. But there is a difference, because when we talk about ethics, they're essentially like a common group understanding of how you should act, but they're not necessarily morals. So ethics is a set of behaviors or a standard of behaviors. They're not feelings. They're not your own personal moral compass. They're not religious. And they may not even be relevant to the law, right? You can actually have laws that are unethical. So what that means is that you can have a code of ethics or be ethical or have a framework of ethics that don't necessarily align with religion, morals, or law. Although I would argue, Sarah, that perhaps they should, either one way or the other, right? What do you think about that?
Yeah. I mean, you would be really, really hoping that our lawmakers are focusing on this, but
and in fact,
live in a real world.
Here's a classic example of an ethical set of standards from the American Medical Association. What was that coaching set of ethical standards you were talking about before in Australia? What was that?
Yeah, so it's a similar looking document, not quite so old, written by all of the coaches. So this is more sort of on the executive coaching side rather than Agile. That they've all agreed to and that you need to agree to if you are to be an accredited coach in this particular coaching federation.
Yeah.
And that's something that as an individual, if you're selecting a coach, or if you are someone like I was in my role where I was making partnerships with all of these coaches that we have across Australia, I would look to see if someone had an accreditation as part of that foundation, because I know that they have signed up to this code of ethics and that they would do things. I mean, there are things in there about, for example, mandatory reporting if you think somebody is going to harm themselves or going to harm other people. Thing. And as a coach, you really dive deeply into someone's experiences and psyche, and you probably get a lot of information about them that they probably wouldn't share with many other people. So I think it's really important to have that overt agreement across a group of people. For me, when I was making decisions about who we would engage, it was really important to know that had been something that these people had to sign up to.
All right. Well, I mean, that's kind of the technical definition of morals and ethics and how they align up together. And Sarah was talking about codes of ethics, right? And in fact, one of those mentioned was a coaching code of ethics. And I'm sure Shane Hasty, who is also on this Zoom call, would love to be talking about agile coaching ethics with all of you at any point, because he's particularly interested in that. Is there an agile coaching code of ethics? Does it exist? Where does it exist? What should it contain? But perhaps it's more than just a code of ethics or like a written law book that's inscribed in a stone tablet somewhere. And I think Sarah's going to ask you to think about, what does ethics really mean? Or what does thinking about or discussing ethics really mean?
Yeah, so hopefully you can all see this cartoon. It's a really awesome cartoon, and it's applicable to what we're looking at today. So I'll just give you a moment to read through it. Maybe give me a thumbs up when you've read it using your Zoom reactions.
You know, it just struck me right now, Sarah, that maybe all agile coaches should take an agile coaching ethics test. like, like,
Maybe.
like Calvin had to, right?
Yeah. I love Calvin and Hobbes. I have such fond memories. My great grandma used to come and visit us, and every time she came, it was a certain day of the week, I can't recall, but she used to always bring the cartoon bit of the newspaper and give it to us, and it would always have some Calvin and Hobbes. I have very fond memories of Calvin and Hobbes and so many amazing life lessons. You might be wondering why I chose a cartoon, and I guess that kind of goes back to my primary school teaching focus. Obviously, we use a lot of things like cartoons and stories to really help children think about ethics and I guess practice what they might do in a real situation. So it's a funny cartoon, but it's also really applicable here because of what you can see Calvin is doing through this whole situation. He is thinking about his reasons. What are his reasons for making that decision? You can see he's using wording like, on one hand, and then again, and then I thought, and then I wondered. And these are all really great phrases to use to help you consider the different reasons that you might make a decision. And as I said, for me in teaching kids about ethics in primary school, we don't teach them a code of ethics. We don't teach them what is right and what is wrong, or what we personally might think is right and what is wrong. What we're teaching them is about how to think about the reasons for making their decisions, and to think about whether those reasons really stack up. Like, would a reasonable person agree with your reasons, I guess is what we're getting them to think about. And the way we do that is by getting them to explain their thinking, which is extremely hard with a group of 5-year-olds. But, we really try to bring out from them, why did you make that decision and what were you thinking about? And then we get other children to say why they thought about it, and if they have any questions about the reasons that someone else has given. So as you can see, our focus is really about making this overt, making it explicit, making people aware of the different thinking processes that people are going through. The definition that we use in Australia in our syllabus around ethical reasoning is a type of critical thinking that uses ethical principles and frameworks. It's a process of identifying ethical issues and weighing multiple perspectives to make informed decisions. Ethical reasoning is not about knowing right from wrong, but about being able to think about and respond to a problem fairly, justly, and responsibly. So yeah, a bit later on, we'll talk about the frameworks that we might have around ethical decision making and how we can come up with our own frameworks. But now we're going to go adventure. It's exciting.
We're showing our age here, Sarah. You just talked about newspapers, and now we're talking about choose your own adventure books. I used to have like a whole library of these.
I have one right here. Can you see it?
Yeah. Yeah, look at that. You've got that actual book.
The actual book.
Is it written in Australian English? Does it say like good day and mate and stuff like that?
Well, this isn't that particular one. This is a different one. I think it's based in the US, this one.
Yeah. All right. So, team, let's do a choose your own adventure book. And some of you perhaps grew up with this just like me and Sarah did, or maybe it's your first time seeing one. But essentially, it's a book that asks the reader to make decisions as they go through the book. And let's see where this takes us, because right now, you're going to go on an adventure and you get to choose what happens. Welcome to Dinosaur Island.
Okay, here we go. So you are an Agile consultant from Australia. You and your colleagues, Sarah and Alex.
That's us.
Flying back to Sydney after a trip to Denver, I wish. Your plane experiences a malfunction and you have to land on a remote tropical island.
This book is incredibly relevant to our current situation, isn't it, Sarah? It's amazing how this is lined up to our situation.
Yeah, it is. All right, so when you get to that island, dust yourself off, nobody's hurt, it's all good. You discover a secret corporate headquarters led by the diabolical genius CEO, Dr. Sean. Dr. Sean is attempting to clone evil carnivorous dinosaurs from ancient DNA samples.
Oh my goodness, this is quite the adventure, Sarah.
It really is.
All right, here we come to your first decision, people. The diabolical genius, Dr. Sean, offers all of you a job as an Agile consultant, as Agile coaches, because he's heard how awesome Agile is. I'm sure a lot of you have been in this situation before where you're about to be hired, perhaps by a diabolical evil genius, right? Now you need to figure out what you want to do. You have the information you have. What decision are you going to make? Are you going to accept the offer and go to page 8, or are you going to decline the offer and go to page 12? We're going to use Zoom reactions for this. If you want to accept the offer and go to page 8, give us a thumbs up. And if you want to decline the offer and go to page 12, give us a clap. Go ahead and give us your Zoom reaction.
I don't know where to do that.
Oh, Zoom reactions are down in the bottom toolbar when you do your little Zoom. Yeah. If you don't know how to do Zoom reactions, just ask and we'll let you know. Okay, so thumbs up, you accept. Clap, you decline. What do you think, Sarah? What are you observing? Are we getting?
I'm seeing. I think we're on the majority of going for it.
Oh my goodness. Okay, now let me do some deck magic here. I have to make sure we go to the right page. So give me a second, okay? All right. So we're accepting the offer. We've got to flip to the right page in the deck. Give me a second. There we go. So you've accepted the job. You now work your Agile magic, and suddenly you've accelerated the delivery of the evil cloned dinosaurs by 6 months. Oh no, Agile's so awesome that you've made it happen more quickly. Ugh.
All right, next decision. Dr. Sean has come to see you as a trusted advisor, and he asks you to oversee the final implantation of the evil gene. We've got it ready. We're ready to go. We know how we can make these dinosaurs evil and carnivorous. You realize that you have the opportunity to determine whether these dinosaurs will be evil or good. So, to implant the evil gene, you're going to go to page 15. or clap. And to accidentally forget, we're going to go to page 21 and do a thumbs up. So to implant the gene, we want to clap. To accidentally forget, go to page 21 and clap. Did I say that right?
Wait, which one's which?
Question. Implanting the gene when clapping, forgetting we're thumbs upping. Okay, Alex, I'm going to let you work your magic here. What did we decide to do?
It looks like the majority of the reactions are telling us to go to page 21.
Okay, so many people with a conscience.
I know. Okay, hang on.
Love to unpack how we're making these decisions.
I gotta find the right slide in the deck now. Give me a second. Okay, we're going to page 21. Okay, here we go.
Okay, so we've decided not to implant the evil gene. 6 months later, a bunch of cute baby dinosaurs are running around the island. They show no signs of the evil nature Dr. Sean had intended.
Excellent. But now Dr. Sean is furious. And he wants you to exterminate all of the baby dinosaurs. So here comes your next ethical dilemma. Do you exterminate the dinosaurs and go to page 28? Or do you carry out a secret rescue operation and go to page 35? So if you want to exterminate them, give a thumbs up. Exterminate, thumbs up. And if you want to secretly rescue them, clap for page 35. Look at this wonderful group of people, Sarah. I think they're all saying clap, right?
They are. Oh, we have one exterminator.
Okay, so we're going to page 35. Give me a second. I have to find the right slide in the deck. Okay. There we go. Oh, you've rescued the dinosaurs. And what's more, you find homes for them all over the place in every zoo across the world. And they're so adorable, you even keep one for yourself. And you call him Toothy. Sweet little baby dinosaur Toothy.
All right, time goes on, and you notice that Toothy's friendly nature is changing. His previously cute teeth have become interested in your flesh. You warn the world about the potential threat of these dinosaurs, or do you wait and see? He's so lovely, and you've really come to enjoy having him in your house. Do you just wait and see if things might improve? So to warn the world, go to page 45, and to wait and see, go to page 50. So thumbs up for warning the world, and clap for waiting and seeing.
What are our reactions here?
Ooh, lots of clapping. You've all been sucked in as I have been with my...
So it looks like we're going to wait and see, it looks like, right?
I think so, yep.
All right, let me find the right page. Give me a second. Okay, here we go.
You decide to wait and see. It's probably just a phase, the terrible twos. Unfortunately, Toothy eats you. We'll never know what happens to the rest of the world.
I think about half the endings in the original books ended up with you dying. That's pretty much the way it worked, right, Sarah?
It is. Yeah. And then you'd go back and do it again and try not to die.
Okay, well, you've just had an adventure on Dinosaur Island. You've had to make a lot of ethical decisions.
Yeah. That was intense, really intense. So luckily, most of us won't be faced with a flesh-eating dinosaur type of dilemma on a regular basis. But certainly, as we've already talked about in this conversation so far, as Agile coaches, and even just as human beings, I'm sure you've had many moments when you've really had to make a tough decision, either as an individual or as a group. Should I go left? Should I go right? Should I stay? Should I go? And how did you decide what to do? And also, how did you evaluate what you did afterwards and think about whether that was the right thing? Did you want to go back and do it again? If you had your chance to do your choose your own adventure again, would you have done something differently? When we are faced with these kind of dilemmas, and you know, like I said, when you're 7 and you want to be on the Student Representative Council, that's a dilemma as well. Often you can get pretty worked up and emotions kind of come in, and they really, you know, our instincts take over and our brains kind of forget to think things through clearly. And that's where having an ethical approach or having made some choices already, or some conversation about how we might approach this decision, having that agreed framework really helps us to put those emotions to one side and consider things a little bit more objectively. So in true Agile style, rather than reinvent the wheel, Alex and I have taken learnings from some of the legends of the past to show how they thought about making decisions with what you might call good reasons. These are some of the more common frameworks that are out there, but of course there are many, many more. And you as an individual or a team or an Agile community can come up with your own framework and approach for how you would like to approach any ethical decisions. So we'll just quickly run through what each of these mean. The utilitarian approach, this is about the sort of do no harm. So it's focusing on sort of the right decision being the one that does the most good or does the least harm, or has that balance really between producing the greatest balance of good over harm for all who might be affected. So that could be stakeholders, community, employees, shareholders, you know, your family, if you're making a decision within the family, whoever might be affected by the decision. So that's the utilitarian approach. The rights approach comes from other philosophers and ethicists who suggested that the right decision is the one that best protects the rights of those affected. This approach kind of started from the belief that humans as a species have an implied level of, I guess, dignity and have a right to choose freely what they do with their lives and not be treated as a means to an end. So there's a list of moral rights that has been widely talked about and debated over hundreds of years. And you'll be familiar with some of those rights now being considered for non-humans too. So robots and animals and that kind of thing. So these rights are things like I said, making your own choices about what kind of life to lead, being told the truth, not being injured, privacy, obviously a huge one at the moment, and so on. So if we were to think about it in this framework, we'd be using these kind of rights to consider the pros and cons of the decision we were about to make. So the fairness or justice approach, Aristotle and other Greek philosophers, I guess one of their contributions to the world was this idea that all equals should be treated equally. And today we use that idea to say that ethical actions are ones that treat all human beings equally. Or if we're treating people unequally, that we're treating them fairly. So one of the ways to think about this is to think about how we pay people in an organization. We pay people more based on harder work or more technical work, more difficult work, or the greater amount that they contribute to an organization. We say that that is fair. But there is obviously lots of debate over CEO salaries that are, maybe hundreds of times larger than the pay of other people in the organization. And many ask whether that huge disparity is something that we can say is defensible, or whether it's the result of something that's, a power imbalance and would be therefore unfair. So if we're thinking about things in this fairness or justice approach, it's about, are we treating everyone equally or fairly based on some standard that we've agreed? the common good approach. This is the idea of thinking that, there is community and life in a community is good in itself. And so we want to be contributing to that community, and our actions should be contributing to the community and the welfare of everyone. And then the virtue approach. So I'm sure you've all heard of what a virtue is, this ancient kind of approach of what is the best person that I could be, and how can I be my absolute best? And things like honesty and courage and compassion, generosity, love, tolerance, fairness. These are all things that we consider to be virtues. And so using this kind of a framework, we would be asking ourselves, what sort of person would I become if I made this decision? Or is this action consistent with me acting at my best? So these are all examples of ethical approaches that have been discussed and debated over years and years. Some will resonate with you, some will not. And some people will come to decisions using completely different reasons, but come to the same decision, as we experienced just then on our adventure, and when we were thinking about whether we'd stay in the good place or go to the bad place. So I guess what I'd say is that we all know that working in teams, it's really important to have that understanding of your team and to know how they're making decisions and to know what their values are. So, as our quote earlier in the session said, principles aren't principles when you pick and choose when you're going to follow them, and having an agreed approach to how you might make an ethical decision will really help to ensure that we're aligning our principles, that as a team we can understand how we're making decisions together.
So talking about approaches, Sarah, I mean, we've actually come up with a framework that you might think about when you're encountering these ethical dilemmas as an Agile coach, or as an Agile transformation agent, or a Scrum Master, or somebody working with teams, helping them with their ways of working. So here's what Sarah and I have come up with. This is Athena, the Greek goddess of wisdom. And Athena was also the patron goddess of the city of Athens, where philosophy and ethical discussion in the Western world was born. So what Sarah and I are proposing here is that you can go through an ethical reasoning process when you encounter these ethical dilemmas, where you actually think about things and come to a rational decision based on thinking about it. And perhaps even more thinking about it, you might discuss it with people as well. So it might be more than just you as an individual making ethical decisions. It might be a group of people or a team of people making ethical decisions. And this Athena approach might be useful for you to think about. So the first thing we need to think about is whether ethics is something that even needs to come into this situation. Does every situation have an ethical component? Probably not. So when you think you have, then perhaps that might be the time to apply it. Now, when we talk about damage, I think this kind of gets back to the whole doctor's code of ethics, which says do no harm. That's essentially what we're asking here is, would this decision you have to make, this ethical dilemma you have to, I don't want to say solve, but you have to come to some kind of resolution on, will it damage a group of people? Will it harm a group of people? Will it harm an individual person? That's the first thing I would be thinking about when I'm encountering an ethical dilemma. Is it going to do damage to a certain group of people? The next thing I would like to think about is, do I have all the context, all the information that I need to make the decision? And in fact, when we did the first chat blast, Sarah, that was one of the questions that somebody asked. Do I have enough information to make the right decision? So you might need to think about, do you really know what's going on here? You might have to go figure out some more information before you can make a decision that's truly rational, rather than just by the seat of your pants. Then you could think about approaches. You might use or think about the approaches that Sarah just covered, right? Are you going to use like a values-based approach, or are you going to use like a greater good approach, or are you going to use an approach that emphasizes fairness and justice for all? So there's a lot of approaches there that you could be thinking about. You might be in a situation where a particular approach might be more relevant or more useful or be more applicable in the context you have. But I think understanding what all those different types of approaches are and how you might use them in your rational decision-making process could be quite useful for you and a team. Next, you want to think about the test. And the test might be a hypothetical test, like what's going to happen if you actually make a certain decision? What are the possible outcomes? There's a classic thing where if you're going to do something and you're questioning whether or not you think it's ethical, you would ask yourself, if my grandma was going to read a newspaper article about what I did in the morning Denver paper, would she be proud of what I did or not? Right? That's like a hypothetical test where you're thinking about what could possibly happen as an outcome of what I'm about to make a decision on. Then finally, almost finally, you have to make the actual decision itself, which is where you take your action. It might be as simple and clear-cut as our choose your own adventure, where it's one or the other. It might be a spectrum of decisions you might have to make, or even a sequence of decisions. But ultimately, you're probably going to end up making a decision. But hopefully, you've gone through some kind of analytical process where you've actually thought about it or even discussed it as a group in a team setting, and then you actually take an action that you all agree will satisfy the conditions you've put into place. And then finally, after you've made the decision, you need to think about what's actually happened now. What actually happened? Was that what I thought was going to happen, or did it turn out entirely unexpectedly? Why did that happen? Why did it not happen? And what did I learn? And in fact, if you look at this Athena model, damage, information, approach, test, action, learn, you can kind of think of it as the PDCA loop, with just a couple of steps inserted in there for an ethical decision-making process, right? So first you're asking yourself, what harm will it do? The second, you're asking what information I have. What possible approaches could I take? I'm gonna actually think about what could possibly happen. I'm gonna do the thing, and then I'm gonna do a learn. And as Agilists, I'm sure we're all familiar with this feedback loop process. Ethical reasoning is also a feedback loop process. It's just that we're kind of applying it to an ethical decision-making dilemma. So let's talk about a classic Agile coaching dilemma. I work with a lot of teams, and I do assessments, and teams might ask me how they're doing, or executives might be asking me how teams are doing. But I think when you're an Agile coach working with teams in an organization, you're inevitably going to be in a situation where you might have to tell a little Agile coaching white lie, right? So you're in a retrospective and you're working with the team and you're trying to build rapport, and they ask you how they're doing. And you say, well, team, you are doing great, right? You tell them they're doing a great job because you're using positive reinforcement. You're setting a positive tone. The psychology of well-being and positive psychology says, positive reinforcement. Tell the team they're doing a great job. But what they don't know, and what you know, is that they are in truth the worst Agile team you've ever seen in your life, right? We've all been there. Oh yeah, team, you're great. Oh my God, this team's so terrible. Geez, right? But now you've told a little white lie. That's a very typical example of an Agile coaching ethical decision you might have to make. Should I or should I not tell them that they are the world's best Agile team, or should I tell them the real truth, which is that I think they're terrible? That's a difficult decision, perhaps, when you encounter it for the first time. Now, there are consequences for each of these decisions that you make. And when we talked about actually learning from this in the Athena loop process of ethical decision making, you have to think about what immediate and local consequences are there going to be, what long-term and extended consequences are there going to be. Maybe there's consequences you haven't even thought about. So what's going to happen if you tell them they're the best team? If you tell them that they're the best team, perhaps they'll stop improving or stop trying new things because they already think they're the best. Or vice versa, you might tell them, they're not the best team, and then you don't build a rapport with them, and they don't listen to you. So you've ended up with terrible outcomes in both cases. So you have to be thinking about those things.
Awesome. So we can take some questions, and maybe people have some thoughts on those scenarios and things that you have encountered before. But before we get to that, this is a quote by one of my favorite characters in The Good Place, which is, "I have no idea what's going on right now, but everyone else is talking, and I think I should too." And really, that's kind of my takeaway for you out of this session is just to talk about it, to have the conversation, to bring it up, to ask people how they make decisions. And, as coaches, you're in a fantastic position to have those conversations with people who are making really important decisions, and to just really encourage them to think about things from different perspectives and consider those different ways that they might make the decisions, those different reasons that they're making the decisions for. My learning and development background will tell me that it's a lot easier to practice this kind of thing on easier decisions before you get to one of those big ethical dilemmas, like, should I implant the gene in the evil dinosaurs? So, take time with your next few, maybe smaller decisions. And that's really what we encourage students to do in our primary school, is to think about these things, even if they might not be the hugest decision that they need to make. Who should I invite to my birthday party? How do I talk to somebody about a party that I went to on the weekend that they weren't invited to? These are all small things, but for children, they are important, and it's all about giving them practice about how to think about the reasons for doing something. So think, talk to your teams. I would encourage you to go back and just open the conversation and talk to your teams about the way that you might make decisions, and then reflect back on it. As Alex said, in our Athena model that we've come up with, that last step of learning and taking a reflective position on what you've done is really important. Think back to all the people that you may have coached, and consider what impact you have had on them, and whether or not perhaps you would do something differently in the future. Run some scenarios, think about what's happened in the past, and really agree in your mind about common approaches to go forward.
Okay, Alex and Sarah, and we have a couple of comments here. Kim says, how about telling them the truth in a positive way? I think that's in response to Alex's concern about, having a team that maybe isn't doing as great as you want them to believe.
Well, yeah. So me and Sarah had an agreement coming into this, how we were going to do Q&A. So the agreement was that we would play an angel and a devil. So this is the way it's going to work. I'm going to be the angel, and Sarah's going to be the devil. So we're going to play opposite ends of the spectrum on answering questions. So Sarah, as the devil, how would you answer the question?
I'm channeling my inner bad Janet for those people who have watched The Good Place. The truth in a positive way is a nice ideal. It's still difficult to get to that point of telling them that they're bad in a good way. I think you just got to get out there, just say it how it is.
Well, I would counter that with they're definitely going to learn the most if you're phrasing everything in a positive way, because it instills a culture of positivity towards learning and reflection. So everything that goes wrong in the team, I would definitely spin in a positive way. So everything becomes a learning opportunity. So no matter how bad things get, always spin it in a positive way.
Thanks so much, guys. It's great having you.
Thanks, Alex.
Thank you.